Hi everybody, welcome to today's edition of the CrossFit Games Update Show. I'm Sean Woodland with Annie Sakamoto and Tommy Marquez, taking a look at the individual qualifiers for the 2016 Reebok CrossFit Games out of the East Regional, and this was the first really good look that we got at Katrin Davidsdottir as she starts her title defense from 2015.
And it started off pretty well for her. I have to say I was quite impressed with her regional performance as a whole.
I'm also really excited to see Michele Letendre, her last performance, but also her 6th consecutive performance at the CrossFit Games.
Let's take a look at the qualifiers from the East Regional from the women's side of things. 4 veterans and 1 rookie, and of course the defending fittest woman on earth wins the regional. The only rookie is Tasia Persevich. More on her in a second, but last year Katrin Davidsdottir shows up at the games. I don't think many people had her on their radars as far as someone who would contend for let alone a podium spot, but also the top spot. Now she comes in with expectations. Now she has pressure. How does that affect her?
It seemed to affect her really well. We saw a leaner, meaner, and most importantly, more confident Katrin Davidsdottir that weekend. It opened up, she had a great smile, but she also had a fire to her performance. So she opened up with that snatch ladder at a kind of a blistering pace, ended up doing great. The only thing that we did see, which I wouldn't have expected, was a hole in her game still with the legless rope climbs. That was actually very surprising for me, but what was great was that she remained calm this time. So versus 2014 when she missed going to the games and she kind of fell apart on those legless rope climbs. Now we saw the poise, the confidence, she remained cool and still finished in first place. So I think that's a good sign towards this coming games.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, especially with that last event. There are 2 things that very much characterize a champion. That's poise and composure, really in the face of adversity. And Katrin showed that despite struggling with the legless rope climbs, being able to finish. And then you talk about pressure. There's not going to be much more pressure on you than in the very first time we see you take the competition floor in a live event setting at regionals with the crown on your head. And she did that in event 1 and came out and absolutely torched the field, so I don't think pressure is going to be a big factor.
Annie, you mentioned Michele Letendre at the top of the show here. She has said that this is her last trip to the CrossFit Games. Tommy, is this a victory lap for her, or is she a legitimate contender here?
She is 100% a legitimate contender, Sean. I don't think that the word victory lap even exists in her vocabulary. Just to tell you about what kind of company she is, making her 6 consecutive CrossFit Games, there have been 384 athletes that have qualified for the Games since 2009 when qualifications began. Only 10 have made to 6 consecutive games, and she's one of them. That's 2%. She is without a doubt, an elite company. She's finished as high as 4th at the Games. She's won events on every level. I think she's just one of the most well-rounded female CrossFitters, and having a bad finish last year kind of gives her a little bit of an edge, and there's nothing more dangerous than an athlete that's not afraid to lose, and I think that's what she is this year.
Carrie Pierce is back for her 2nd trip to the CrossFit Games. Last year she makes it to the Games after only 6 months of experience in the sport. Now she's had more than a year to train here. What can we expect to see from her in her 2nd go-around?
I think we can expect a lot. Like you said, she had only been training for 6 months in CrossFit and finishes 21st at the Games last year, which is pretty phenomenal just to make it, but then to have such a good showing. She got a 5th place in Murph and a 3rd place in the Pedal to the Metal 2, I believe it was, or actually 1. So we know she's great at pulling. We saw that again in the Regional Nate, one of only 2 women to finish Regional Nate. But overall, her weekend just looked really well. She looked very posed. She had 1 9th place finish, 17th place finish in event 3. But other than that, she was always inside the top 9 through the whole weekend.
Caroline Reason-Thibault and Tasia Persevich, she's the lone rookie here, round out the 5. What's the best case scenario for those 2?
Well, for Thibault, I think it's top 10. She's performed very well in the Open, top 10 worldwide 2 years in a row. Outside of a bonk in the final event at regionals this year, she very well could have won the regional ahead of Katrin Davidsdottir, who we talked about having an impressive performance. And Reason-Thibault is one of the few athletes I think last year got a little bit overwhelmed by the Games atmosphere. Experience is going to be her best friend coming back this year. I think she does some things very well that could put her in the top 10. And then for Persevich, I think top 15. At this stage of the game, it's so hard for rookies to come in and make a splash outside of people like Sigmundsdottir, who are almost force of nature type athletes. And I think for Persevich, you look at the field she's up against, 4 former champions, 18 different women that have finished inside the top 10 at the games that are taking the floor this year. Top 15 would be a great accomplishment.
Let's go over to the men's side now, where it is the same makeup as the women's side as far as the qualifiers are concerned. 4 games veterans and 1 games rookie, and they're led by Mat Fraser, the man who has finished second 2 years in a row at the games. Patrick Vellner is the only rookie, but when you look at Mat Fraser, anybody who said that they'd finished second back-to-back at the CrossFit Games, that's a hell of an accomplishment. But I know for him, there's some disappointment in there just because of what he thought he would accomplish last year. Is it win or bust for him in 2016?
Absolutely. If you saw the Fittest film documentary, he had some choice words about second place. But until the day that Mat Fraser stands on top of the podium with a gold medal around his neck, his CrossFit Games season will be 100% win or bust at the CrossFit Games. And really, that's in large part due to the fact that there's nothing left for him to prove really as an individual in this sport. He's won the Worldwide Open, he's won his regional 3 years running, he's finished on the podium at the games multiple times in a year, he's finished as high as you physically can, absent of winning, and you look at how he's performed, he's won events on every level, worldwide and the Open, at regionals, and he's won events at the games. All that's left to do is have a gold medal at the games.
Spencer Hendel is another guy who's coming back for a return trip. He's been there multiple times, and he was a fixture in Carson for a long time, then a 2-year absence, then comes back and finishes 5th. So what changed for him?
It's this year, and I love Spencer Hendel, and he's a really good friend. I have to admit, watching the regionals through the weekend, I was kind of like, well, maybe Spencer doesn't want to make it back. And then he has this phenomenal performance on the last event, which catapults him into qualifying position. And that, to me, was very reminiscent, actually, of his performance at the Games last year. He obviously wasn't in a dire situation at the Games last year, but he has this first place finish on both Pedal to the Metal 1 and 2. It helps him finish in 5th place. Spencer just seems to be one of these guys where he likes to have the pressure on. He wants to make a statement. The Games itself, I think, are a better venue for Spencer than regionals. So I'm really excited to see him there. I think he's such an athletic guy that when we get some of these more oddball things, these kind of just outside of the typical CrossFit Games movements, we'll get to see Spencer shine. Plus his dad is there. I think that's going to be really fun for him to have his dad with him.
Patrick Vellner, the only rookie in this group going to the CrossFit Games. We saw the gutsy performance that he put up at regionals with that torn biceps. Is this kid going to be healthy enough to be a factor in Carson?
I think so. I mean, you take into consideration first that he qualified for the CrossFit Games with a fresh injury. It had just happened, and he still held strong the entirety of that weekend. I chatted with him briefly, and he mentioned that, you know what, he's not 100% for the games. He still has to train, even though he's had 7 weeks to recover a little bit. But thankfully, the bicep isn't a muscle that comes to the forefront really in a lot of movement, so he's able to kind of train around that and do a majority of what would be demanded of a CrossFit athlete in the gym. You couple that with the fact that he was living with Michele Letendre up until they head to Carson, training with her. She's a great person to have on your side, so I think he definitely can be a factor.
Albert Dominic LaRouche and Alex Vigneault are Games veterans who are returning this year as well. They have, as far as Canadians are concerned, some pretty good company going with them to the Games. Is there a chance that these two could be the 2 highest finishing Canadian men at the Games?
I definitely think there's a chance. I think this is actually, though, the best group of Canadian men that we've seen ever, if not in a really long time. Albert Dominic LaRouche, he was out early in 2014 Games. He had to withdraw due to an injury. And then he actually took 2015 to recover. Tommy was mentioning earlier that he took an 8-month sabbatical this year to focus just on his training. So I expect that he's pretty hungry for it, and he could finish really well and be one of the ones that would qualify for the team competition.
Well, that is going to do it for us for today. We'll be back with more tomorrow as far as previewing the individuals are concerned for the 2016 Reebok CrossFit Games. If you want to know how you can watch the games here in the United States, we're going to be live on ESPN and ESPN2 throughout the weekend. Go to games.crossfit.com. Look up the article, How to Watch the Games. It'll have all the information you need in order to get yourself set for a pretty fun weekend of CrossFit viewing. We will see you guys tomorrow with more on the 2016 individuals at the CrossFit Games.